One thing that I'll always remember while growing up was the amazing feeling that I got from watching superhero shows. From shows like Batman the Animated Series, to Superman the Animated Series and other shows from the DCAU, to shows like Spiderman the Animated Series and the OG X-Men series. We can even shift the gears outside of Marvel and DC to shows like Ben 10, the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, Samurai Jack, and Danny Phantom. And while I know Avatar isn't the traditional superhero show, I'm still gonna add that to the list, due to the show exploring the theme of good versus evil. But the point is that we had a ton of really good superhero shows. That is, until we didn't. After going on a run of having incredible shows, something happened, and they ended up becoming worse. Whether it was from a change in animation or lazy writing, hero shows became a shell of their former selves, and it would leave a lasting impact within the hero media, causing a decline in interest from viewers like myself who originally loved watching these shows growing up. But recently there has been a much needed change that has put the genre back on the right track, to eventually being how it used to be, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. I also want to take this time to give a huge shout out to Miri Dawn and Time Pizza, as they'll be helping out with today's video. Make sure that you check them out if you haven't already, as their links will be in the description down below. And with that being said, let's get into this video. I think that it's very important to start with the show that I believe revitalized the genre. Yes, I'm talking about... This show has truly been a game changer. Being that this was the first show on the list to come out, it has truly done an incredible job. From the ever-growing storylines, to the amazing character development, hard-working voice cast, and highly intense action sequences. This show does it all, and quickly separated itself from animated shows that came before it. Now, I know that the show isn't perfect, as the animation has been very wonky at times. And don't even get me started on Season 2's mid-season break, or this might just turn into a rant. But I will say that I think that even with these problems, the pros highly outweigh the cons. Season 3 just finished, and I'm already missing the feeling of watching a new episode. It's just that good. I also think that it's important to note that for me, this show brought back a lost art form that was usually present in most of the older shows, but became mostly non-existent in the newer shows, until recently. And that's darker themes. This show is full of dark themes, as the characters in this universe constantly deal with tragic events, especially Mark, and it really defines him as a hero, because no matter how many times he falls or gets beat up, he always gets back up.
Invincible is this generation's superhero. Listen, every few years, audiences are attached to superheroes. It doesn't matter if it's the 90s, if it's the 70s, or if it's even the 2020s. People love superheroes, and they need a superhero of each decade in order to define that generation of people that are into characters or heroes. And for us currently modern audiences, honestly, that superhero for us is Invincible. Invincible in a strange way gives us every single superhero trope that exists, but it makes it so realistic that you have to keep watching to see where this story is gonna go. Like, the best way I can describe it is Invincible takes Marvel and DC tropes, but adds the idea of the world being way more realistic and brutal to it. Like, don't get me wrong, those publications have gone to some really dark places and they've had some very real stories, but something about Invincible always feels real, brutal, and constantly on the edge of world-ending stakes. Like, there is no just regular supervillain to fight. And with Invincible being a result of those paths that Marvel and DC has walked before, it's been able to take those elements and really make a unique superhero identity for Invincible in its comics. It's not just an inspiration and a reference to those types of stories, but it's its own complete separate existing entity.
Now, there are very few shows that can make a return almost 30 years after having a series finale and pick up right where they left off. Yet, X-Men 97 seems to pull off the impossible, keeping the tone similar to the original series while also making the show refreshing for a newer audience. There were a lot of positives with this show. The storylines were really good. We got to see the return of most of the original voice cast, which is always dope to see. And the action sequences were absolutely fire. But if there's one thing that I really enjoyed this season, it has to be how they handled Cyclops. Don't get me wrong, every character was well developed, but it felt really good to see Cyclops take charge and get back to being the strong team leader that he used to be depicted as. Let's face it, in most shows and other X-Men media, he's usually been depicted as taking a back seat to Wolverine. But in this show, he was able to fully shine even while going through his troubles. I also want to say that like Invincible, the first season of X-Men 97 also had darker themes, and you can tell that it enhanced the show as it kept the stakes high and didn't shy away from character deaths. This show saw a lot of success, and honestly, it's well deserved.
X-Men 97 was a fantastic reintroduction to some old favorites. It not only brought back the classic characters, but also made me care about certain ones way more, especially Rogue and Gambit. Their dynamic was handled so well that it really stood out. I enjoyed the Cyclops, Jean, Wolverine love triangle more than usual. The show also did a great job in writing both Magneto and Professor X. Their arcs felt fresh while staying true to who they are. And Nightcrawler, absolutely incredible per usual.
Superman is one of the most recognizable heroes in the genre, and we've seen him countless times, whether it was in movies, TV shows, or older video games. But if we're being completely honest, it's been a long time since he's had his own animated show. Now, he was a main character in multiple Justice League shows, and he appeared in a few Batman shows, but honestly, it's not the same. And with the last solo Superman show releasing in the 90s, it felt like another solo Superman show would never happen. That is, until My Adventures with Superman was released. Now, compared to the previous two shows that were talked about on this list, this show is much more lighthearted. But that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. I think that having a lighthearted Superman show that's not afraid to get serious at times is really good, as it adds variety to the animated hero landscape. Now, this show is definitely cheesier than the others, but like I said in the last Superman video, I always felt like Superman was cheesy, and that's okay. It doesn't take anything away from the character. Now, some of my gripes with the show is that the animation is hit or miss, and that some of the character designs are just awful. But I do think that the best parts of this show is the storylines and the relationships that the characters have with Clark Kent. It highlights how vulnerable Superman can be even without the kryptonite, and also shows why he strives to be the best superhero that he can be. Moving on to the next show, we have Creature Commandos. I can honestly say that this show took me by surprise. Being that this was the first project from James Gunn's DCU, I really didn't know what to expect. But after finishing the first season, I have to say that this show is actually amazing. Most people just wrote this show off as a monster version of the Suicide Squad, and they're not wrong. It is a monster version of the Suicide Squad. But the writing and character development in this show arguably makes this team better than the other versions of the Suicide Squad. Learning the tragic backstories to each character easily made me care more about them. And being that they weren't normal heroes, they were able to use other methods to get their jobs done. I really enjoyed this show's animation. And being that this was a darker, more mature show, they really didn't hold back at times. And it's definitely one of the strengths of the show. Characters like the Bride, Nina, and Dr. Phosphorus were easily my favorites of the season. I also like the fact that they didn't shy away from blood. I don't really have any complaints with this show, outside of wishing that the season was a little bit longer.
Listen, Creature Commandos is a special case. It's one of those shows that we are really lucky that it caught the fire that it needed to catch, because the man behind this is also the same man who ended up giving us Guardians of the Galaxy. The same man who ended up giving us a revamped and better Suicide Squad. And the same man who is currently leading DC's entire future, James Gunn. Like, it seems like with Creature Commandos, he's been able to expand his team hero come together formula and turn it up 10 times more, because now it's an animation. The Creature Commandos come together like a Suicide Squad or Guardians of the Galaxy does, but these are people that literally wouldn't be here if they just didn't look how they did or they were born the way they were. Like, they are forced to exist, but they find solace and relation in each other, and they pull it off in some of the most badass ways possible. I'm not gonna lie, this formula is basically James Gunn's Let F You 3 that LeBron be pulling out. But I can't lie, I'm a sucker for losers coming together to be something greater.
Next, we have Batman Caped Crusader. This was my most anticipated show on this list, as I grew up a big fan of Bruce Timm and the DCAU. And with that being said, I was really excited for Caped Crusader. And after having some time to sit with this show, I still feel that this is a good show, just with a few problems. But let's start with the highlights first. I really like the classic designs of Batman and the other characters in this show. And while it does have the familiar DCAU art style, it does enough to set itself apart from the previous shows. I also really enjoyed some of the villains in this show. Villains like Harley Quinn, Gentleman Ghost, Clayface, and Natalia Knight stood out in their respective episodes. I also really enjoyed their interpretation of Two-Face, as we got to see a new interpretation of his tragic transformation over the course of the season. The supporting cast was also very solid, and I think that the voice actor of Batman did a really good job. Now, let's get into some of my problems with the show. I think that gender swapping Penguin Penguin was a horrible idea, mainly because it just didn't make sense. What makes it even worse is that the showrunners came out and said that they gender swapped Penguin because Batman doesn't have good female villains. I think that that's a terrible excuse considering that one of the showrunners was responsible for creating characters like Harley Quinn, Livewire, Red Claw, and so many other good female villains for previous shows. Another problem that I had with this show was that I felt like Batman didn't have any character development. Oftentimes he just comes in and fights the villains and gives the cold shoulder to Alfred, not fully allowing us to grow with the character like how we were in previous shows. But I also think that that's something that could be worked on in season 2.
The Batman Caped Crusader show was a solid one overall. Given the expectations, it definitely lived up to the hype. I enjoyed the unique interpretations of the characters, especially Harvey Dent, who stood out the most. The characters had enough depth to keep things interesting, and the action was well executed. Every character felt well utilized, though I wasn't the biggest fan of the changes to Penguin. It wasn't a deal breaker, just something that didn't really click for me. The animation felt a bit weak, but the show itself was strong enough to make up for it. What really stood out was the 1940s noir aesthetic. It fit perfectly, and more Batman media should embrace that style. For me, the best episode was Nocturne. Everything about it was incredible. I really liked how they introduced all the Robins at once in such a unique way. It felt new and well executed. Natalia's character also stood out, and her arc made the episode more emotional. I'm especially looking forward to seeing how they handle the Robins, and if the show keeps up this level of quality, I'd be more than happy to see more seasons.
For the final show, we have your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, I know that this show gets a lot of hate because of the race swapping of certain characters and the animation, but to be completely honest, this is another show that surprised me. Considering that there are a ton of animated Spider-Man shows, I was actually shocked to see that they went a different route with telling Spider-Man's story. And considering that this version of Spider-Man is adjacent to the MCU version, it was cool to see this version have a different relationship with Norman and take on some of his classic villains. Other highlights of the show was seeing some familiar faces return, like Iron Man, Daredevil, and Doctor Strange, and also seeing Lonnie Lincoln go from being the star high school quarterback to the notorious criminal Tombstone. This animation is also hit and miss at times, as sometimes it feels like a moving comic book page, and other times you can legit see background characters acting like they're legit in the comic book page. But overall, this Spider-Man show is really solid. I enjoyed the supporting characters like Nico and Harry Osborn, and like most of the other shows on this list, this show had darker moments than the normal Spider-Man show, with Peter almost dying by Scorpion, and I really enjoyed watching Peter struggle with trying to figure out what type of hero he should be.
It's early, but I am being honest when I say your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man may end up being one of the most important shows, not only to MCU Spider-Man, but to Spider-Man in general. Legit, it's the top contender for modern Spider-Man cartoons, not only because it takes from the new, but it completely borrows from the old as well, and it combines them to make a perfect Spider-Man fusion. Like, I think a lot of people in the past have had issues with Spider-Man shows as they've continually tried to add something that's never been done before. But I think audiences got tired of that and they wanted something that felt fresh without feeling different. And that's where your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man comes in, because initially coming into it, the MCU Spider-Man was very hated by core Spider-Man fans, with how he was treated by Iron Man and how he saw him as such a big mentor. But your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man takes place in an adjacent universe that basically takes all of the MCU stuff that people didn't like about this Spider-Man and adds core comic elements to it in order to give us a fully fleshed out modern Spider-Man that audiences had been looking for. And he has one of the most insane time loop spider bite origins, but he still has the core elements of being a Peter Parker who's meant to be Spider-Man.
Overall, I think that the state of animated hero shows are getting back to a good place. And even with some shows being better than others, I don't think that any show is truly terrible, as there's a show for everyone, and each show can continuously improve. If you made it to the end of this video, let me know what shows you liked and didn't like in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm SHAWNODACHI, and I'm out.